I'm Skylar Quinn. Today I'm 34. But this story kicks off on the day I turned 15. I stood in Terminal 4 at JFK. Arms wrapped around a battered teal suitcase, watching my mom's heels click away toward the first-class desk. She didn't look back. Mom Vivian Hayes had always called us a team. Just her and me in our tiny bungalow on the outskirts of Richmond. Virginia. I believed it. I believed her when she said her all-nighters redesigning uptown lofts were for us. I believed her when she poured boxed macaroni into a bowl and called it gourmet. I believed her until the night she traded me for designer luggage. My life, until that summer, was quiet. I was tall and lanky, with knobby knees and way too many freckles across my nose. I pulled my sleeves over my hands when I was nervous and talked to plants, spoke to my spider plant like it was my confidant. Mom said it was creative, but mostly she pretended not to notice that I was shy and needed space. Everything changed the evening she introduced Mr. Bennett, a man in a charcoal suit and dark glasses who could have been a movie extra. He showed up to pick up billings, she said, but he stayed for dinners, picture-perfect weekends, and late-night texts. He had 2 kids, Sophie and Garrett, both in prep school up north. Mom's phone buzzed, non-stop with his invitations. Come to the Hamptons. Join us in Nantucket. Let's breathe fresh ocean air. I met them once at a cafe on Church Hill. Sophie was polite. Garrett barely looked up from his phone. Mr. Bennett shook my hand like he was handling fine china. You must be Skylar, he said, voice smooth as silk. I nodded. He flashed a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mom beamed at us both, then turned back to gossip about how chic his summer house was. I slipped away. In the weeks that followed, Mom vanished into shopping sprees. Spa days. Weekend getaways, always with Bennett and his kids. She came home with bags of clothes she said I'd grown out of. Like I was a child who needed a makeover, instead of the teenager I'd become. She kept saying, he just wants to help. But I knew help was a loud, showy thing that didn't hide behind whispered promises. Then came the Santorini trip. I remember the day she woke me before sunrise, shaking me awake like a kid on Christmas morning. Pack your swimsuit, she chirped. We're leaving for Greece in 3 hours. I blinked against the glare of her excitement, ran cold water on my face, and slipped into jeans. When I asked about Dad's number, she laughed it off. You'll see, everything will be perfect. The drive to the airport felt like a dream I couldn't wake from. Mom bounced in the passenger seat, phone glued to her ear, talking over the roar of the engine. First-class lounge. Table for us 4. Private villa. She handed me a matching designer suitcase. You need to look the part, she said. I forced a smile, but my gut twisted into knots. At the check-in desk, Mr. Bennett nodded toward the first-class line. Mom's eyes flicked to mine. Sky, she said, voice soft now. You wait here. It's better if it's just us 4. We'll send you instructions. Instructions, I thought. She placed her hand on my arm, gentler than I'd ever felt. You're not coming, she said. My laugh echoed, sharp and angry and broken. You're leaving me at the airport. There was no pity in her face, just a spark of guilt that she smothered instantly. You're 15, she snapped. You have your phone. Figure it out. Then she turned and walked away, trailing Bennett and his children behind her like a parade I wasn't invited to. I froze. The roar of travelers and announcements blurred around me. The new suitcase felt like an anchor in my hand. My chest tightened until I couldn't breathe. I slid down onto a bench, head in my hands, and stared at millions of feet hurrying by. No tears came. I was too stunned to cry. After what felt like hours, I keyed through my contacts. Friends from middle school, neighbors, our dentist. No one. Then, at the bottom, my dad, Elliot Quinn. My father, who'd vanished when I was 9, leaving nothing but a voicemail. "I'll call you soon." He never did. I pressed his name, thumb trembling. The phone rang twice. Then a low voice. "Hello." Did my voice cracked? "Mom, she left me here." "Stay where you are," he said. "Don't move." I stared at the word JFK on my phone screen. Stay where you are. A man in a black suit found me an hour later. He showed me a clipboard. "Skylar Quinn," he asked kindly. "Private terminal. Car waiting." I followed him through the rush of travelers like a ghost. Outside, a sleek black sedan idled. I climbed in, suitcase in hand, phone pressed to my chest. The car hummed away from the terminal, past the crowds and the chaos, to a hidden jet ramp I never knew existed. A silver Gulfstream sat waiting, its door yawning open like a promise. I swallowed the lump in my throat, climbed the stairs, and took the seat at the window. Through the tiny porthole, the city receded, and I breathed for the first time in days. When we landed in Aspen, twilight painted the snow-capped peaks gold. My dad waited on the tarmac, more solid and real than any memory I had. His arms opened, and I walked into them without thinking. He held me until my knees wobbled. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. That's where it began. Terminal 4 to a private jet, abandoned to a new life with a father I didn't know and a family I never expected. But I've learned that survival starts with a single breath, and mine came on a mountain runway at dusk. I stepped off the jet into a crisp aspen dusk, heart still pounding like a drum roll. And there she was, Hannah Quinn, my new stepmother. Her warm smile, a beacon in the chilly air. She wore a soft cashmere coat and held a pair of mittens out to me as if I were an afterthought she'd been waiting to meet my whole life. Behind her stood 2 kids. Lily with her chestnut curls tucked under a beanie, and Mason clutching a snowboard like it was his lifeline, both watching me like I'd just dropped from the sky. I felt their eyes on me, curious and a little guarded. And in that instant, I realized I was walking into someone else's story and it wasn't mine. But Dad stepped in, his voice steady as mountain air. "Welcome home, Sky." And just like that, I understood why he'd moved heaven and private jets to get me here. The ride to their chalet was a blur of twinkling lights and snowy pines. The silence thick with questions I didn't know how to ask. Dad sat in the passenger seat, his hand grazing mine once before he pulled away. And I wondered if he regretted this rescue or if he'd planned it for years. Hannah navigated winding roads, her focus absolute, and Lily peeked at me over Mason's shoulder, wide-eyed and wordless. I kept my gaze out the window, memorizing every frosted branch, afraid that if I blinked I'd lose the whole moment. When we finally arrived, a chalet bigger than anything I'd ever seen loomed before us, windows glowing like amber jewels in the snow. I swallowed hard, realizing this was not just a house, it was a promise, a challenge, and maybe a trap. Inside, the warmth hit me like a blanket, and the scent of pine-scented candles mingled with cinnamon from the kitchen. Hannah poured hot chocolate for Lily and Mason, and Dad handed me a mug with my name etched on it. I cradled it, surprised at how comforting it felt. The twins chattered about snowball fights and ski lessons, shrugging at me as if I were a new addition to their secret club. I laughed an honest, raw sound that surprised me more than anyone, and for the first time since JFK, I felt something like hope. But as the laughter echoed, a jagged thought cut through me. Was I meant to fit here? Or merely fill a void they didn't know existed? Dinner was simple roast chicken, roasted root vegetables, and a pie that smelled like autumn's last goodbye, and conversation flowed in gentle waves. Hannah asked about school, about my roommates, about my favorite books, and I told her piece by piece, weighing each sentence like a tightrope walk. Dad watched me between mouthfuls, pride shining in his eyes, and I knew he was choosing to believe this was right. Lily reached across the table and squeezed my hand, as if staking a claim. And in that moment, I decided I belonged enough to fight for it. But when Mason excused himself to bed, and Hannah's smile faltered for the briefest second, I sensed an unspoken question hovering in the frosty air. Could I really stay? Later, Dad and I retreated to his study, a wood-paneled room lined with books that smelled of leather and old secrets. He poured us each a drink, scotch for him, soda for me, and leaned forward, eyes earnest. "I've filed everything," he said quietly, tapping a folder thick with custody papers and evidence of Mom's abandonment. My breath caught. I traced the embossed letters on the folder cover, Quinn versus Quine. Hayes. He laid out every letter he'd written, every hearing he'd attended alone, all in silent devotion to getting me back. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of his sacrifice, and felt tears sting my cheeks. "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered, voice shaking. He folded his hands, meeting my gaze. "Because I wanted you to choose. Choose me. Choose this life without feeling obligated." His words slashed through guilt and left something unsteady inside me. That night I lay awake in a room that wasn't mine, listening to the wind whip against the eaves and imagining Mom coasting across Greek waters with Mr. Bennett's laughter as her soundtrack. My fingers traced the rim of a family photo on the bedside table. Me, Dad, Hannah, Lily, and Mason, all smiling like a postcard. I felt an ache, a longing for the past I'd lost, and a fierce loyalty to the future tentatively offered to me. Somewhere between the shadows and the moonlight, I vowed to protect this new life at all costs. But as sleep claimed me, a final doubt whispered, could forgiveness ever fit into a family rebuilt on abandonment? And that's when I heard the soft click of the door and footsteps I recognized all too well. I froze as the study door eased open, casting a sliver of lamplight across my desk. Footsteps padded softly on the rug, too deliberate, too familiar. My heart thudded like a war drum as I recognized the silhouette in the doorway, Vivienne. My mother, framed by the glow, had designer heels swapped for flats, her expensive coat hanging limp. She stopped just inside the threshold, as if unsure she belonged. My chest tightened. I hadn't allowed myself to imagine this moment. Every memory of abandonment surged back, crashing over me like icy waves. She took a tentative step forward, voice trembling. "Skylar." Her words caught on the edge of apology, fragile as spun sugar. I stayed seated, clutching the Scotch glass in my hand, knuckles white. The folder of custody papers lay open on the desk between us, a silent testament to her betrayal. Vivienne's eyes flicked to the embossed letters. Shame rippling across her face. I came because I couldn't live without seeing you, she whispered, voice trembling at the seams. The distance between us crackled with unspoken hurt and longing. Memories flashed unbidden, her warm hand slipping off my arm at JFK. Her shrug like a guillotine. The suitcase tumbling from my grip as I watched her walk away. I closed my eyes, tasting the bitter echo of her final words. Figure it out. That moment never left me. Every night since had been shadowed by her absence. Every holiday marked by her silence. Now, here she was, expecting forgiveness to bloom like wildflowers in winter. I opened my eyes slowly. You left me, I said, voice low but steady. And I survived. She swallowed hard, tears glistening at the corners of her eyes. I thought I was doing what was best for all of us, she insisted, stepping closer, fingers brushing the edge of the folder. Richard's world was different. I cut her off with a cold laugh. His world, my world ended the moment you chose him over me. My words landed like stones. She flinched, as if struck. I realized forgiveness isn't an eraser, it's a fragile bridge that must be built, and she'd demolished every plank. Please, she begged, voice cracking. Let me make this right. I'll move to Aspen. A shadow darkened the doorway behind her dad. He watched us both. Disappointment etched in the lines of his face. Vivienne froze. Guilt folding her in on itself. He didn't need to speak. His presence said everything. Not tonight. She turned slowly. Shoulders slumped under the weight of her own mistakes. I stood and faced her. Chest tight. Breathing shallow. I won't block you if you stay away, I said softly. She nodded once. A single, fragile motion. Then slipped out of the study as quietly as she'd come. The door clicked shut behind her. And Dad stepped forward, crossing the room to stand beside me. We shared a look, one of relief, one of sorrow, and I realized some wounds heal only when the source of the infection is removed. As the lamp's light softened, I knew we were finally free to build something new. The next morning unfolded in soft light and silence. I found myself in the kitchen, tracing the grain of the countertop as Hannah poured steaming coffee into my favorite mug, one with a mountain peak rising above a forest. Dad hovered behind her, offering me a thermos of oatmeal. Lillian Mason slipped in quietly, dragging chairs to the table without a word. We ate in an easy hush, the kind that comes when no one's sure what to say after fireworks. But in that quiet, I felt something unfamiliar belonging. I realized that safety didn't roar like a storm, it whispered like this breakfast, warm and steady. And for the first time in months, the ache in my chest loosened its grip. Later, on my first day at Aspen High, I walked through halls that smelled of lockers and pine-scented body sprays, feeling both invisible and exposed. A cluster of kids leaned over a smartphone at the entrance, muttering about the new girl who landed in a jet instead of a bus. I kept my head down, backpack straps tight against my shoulders. And in every passing glance, I heard the echo of Mom's abandonment, an unspoken question, what makes you worthy? But when I slid into an empty seat, a girl with curly hair and braces offered a small, conspiratorial smile. Fresh snow, she whispered, gives you a clean slate. And in that moment, I decided I'd carve my own path, one footstep at a time. No matter how cold the ground felt, by lunchtime, I navigated the cafeteria like a newcomer on foreign soil, stacks of trays. Clicks in every corner. A football player bumped into my elbow, spilling my water, and laughed with his friends. I braced for humiliation. But before I could retreat, Lily shot past me. Her tray held high like a shield. "Hands off," she snapped. And the boy froze, eyes wide as mountain lakes. She turned to me, cheeks flaming. "Sorry about him," she muttered. Then she winked and dragged me toward an empty table. I sat down, heart hammering, and realized I had an ally I never expected, and that sometimes the family is the first line of defense when the world wants to knock you down. That evening, our family kitchen buzzed with chatter as I helped Hannah chop carrots and Dad stirred spaghetti sauce. Mason talked about a snowboarding competition. Lily teased me about joining the drama club. And Dad announced a weekend ski trip. When Lily suggested I audition for the spring play, my stomach clenched. "Acting isn't your thing." I laughed flatly. She tilted her head, eyes fierce. "Maybe it could be," she said. "You never know until you try." Her challenge landed like a pebble in still water, rippling doubts and curiosities alike. I stirred the sauce slowly, wondering if opening doors I'd slammed shut might lead somewhere I wanted to go or somewhere I feared. Later, in the hush of my room, I stared at the photo of Mom. I'd brought her smiling in Santorini sunlight, oblivious to my world, crumbling behind her. I texted an old friend back in Richmond, but deleted the message before hitting send. Down the hall, I heard Dad's study door click. I knew he was burning the midnight oil on custody appeals. A knock came at my door. Talia, his assistant, with a stack of new school books. She offered a shy smile and whispered, "You did great today." I nodded. And as she closed the door, the emptiness I'd carried began to feel negotiable. But as I lay down, sleep eluding me, a single thought hovered in the dark, no matter how far I ran. Some ghosts don't stay buried, they wait for you to make your bed. And tomorrow, I'd discover which ones were still haunting me. The next morning, I woke to the click of Dad's office door closing and the low hum of the heating vents. I padded downstairs to find Hannah at the island, measuring flour for pancakes, while Lily and Mason bickered over syrup brands like two diplomats negotiating peace. Dad poured us coffee, his eyes warm but tired. And I realized he was holding half the weight of this new family on his shoulders. I slid onto a stool and wrapped my hands around my mug, the steam curling over my knuckles like a promise. Today was the big snowboard qualifier, and Mason shot me a grin that was more dare than brotherly encouragement. "You in or out?" My chest tightened, fear of slipping, of embarrassing myself, but beneath it flickered something else, a need to belong. I met his gaze and nodded. My voice firm, "I'm in." By mid-morning, the mountain's white slopes glimmered under a steel blue sky. Mason handed me a borrowed board far too big, but sturdy, and guided me toward a gentle incline. My legs trembled as I clicked in, heart galloping like avalanche warnings. A cluster of kids from school cheered from the sidelines, and my cheeks warmed, not from the cold but from being seen. I pushed off, wobbling at first, then finding a rhythm, each turn carving confidence into my thighs. At the finish line, I hit a small jump and landed clean, adrenaline roaring in my ears. Laughter bubbled up, raw and unexpected, and as I unstrapped my boots, I realized belonging wasn't a gift, It was something you risked falling for. That afternoon, back at the chalet, I thawed hands over hot cocoa while Dad scrolled through emails in the living room. His phone buzzed relentlessly with updates, court dates, articles. A whispered rumor Mom was stirring in Richmond's social circles. I sensed the tension coil around him like a winter storm. And I slipped beside him on the couch. "What is it?" I asked softly. He hesitated, thumb hovering over a subject line, Hayes family scandal update. "It's nothing you need to worry about," he said, closing the laptop. But I saw it in his eyes the fight wasn't over. My pulse stuttered. This new life was safe but fragile. And every echo of Mom's world threatened cracks in our foundation. Later, I found Hannah arranging flowers in the foyer, wild daisies in a crystal vase that caught the late afternoon light. She glanced up, soft worry in her eyes. "Your mother called the house back in Richmond," she said quietly, as if sharing a confession. My stomach lurched. What I whispered. Hannah touched my arm, gentle but firm. "She left a message for you, said it's urgent." My throat closed. I remembered the first time Mom abandoned me at an airport. I remembered the knife of that goodbye. Now she wanted to talk. My mind raced. Was this another trap, a PR stunt? Or did she finally feel genuine regret? My breath caught. Choosing silence felt safe. But unanswered questions have teeth that gnaw. That night, I paced the study while Dad spread maps and case files across the desk. Outside, the wind rattled the eaves, like an unseen audience waiting for our next move. I held my phone. Mom's voicemail blinking on the screen. "Skylar. It's me. Please call back. I need you." My thumb hovered. I felt Lily's gaze as she lingered at the doorframe. Concern in her wide eyes. Behind me, the custody folder lay open. A reminder of every wrong she'd done. Could I let her back in? Even this little? I swallowed. The choice stretched before me like one of Aspen's endless slopes. Risk the fall or stay at the top looking down. In the quiet that followed, Dad closed the file and met my eyes. "Whatever you decide, I've got you," he said, voice low and steady. I nodded, feeling the heft of his promise settle like fresh snow. But as I slipped away to my room, Mom's words echoed, "I need you." Need has a way of bending even the strongest wills. And I realized the only way to move forward was to face the past, no matter how deep the scars. The moonlight spilled across my desk, illuminating the unresolved message. Tomorrow, I would press play and step onto that thin line between forgiveness and self-preservation, and I didn't know which way I'd lean. The first thing I did that morning was hit play on Mom's voicemail while the sky outside my window was still the color of ash. Her voice trembled through the speaker. "Skylar. Please. I never wanted to hurt you. Can we talk?" My chest tightened as the words echoed in the quiet room. Years of silence pressed on my eardrums like too tight headphones. I stared at the phone, heart hammering, remembering how her footsteps had faded down the terminal that day, leaving a void I'd filled with snow and silence. I realized then that answering this call was like cracking open a glacier once the ice broke. Everything inside would spill out. I dialed her number before I could change my mind, pacing the length of my room as the line rang. "Hello," she answered, voice brittle. I took a breath and said, "You left me at an airport." Her breath caught. "I know," she whispered. "I thought it would be easier for all of us." I felt tears sting my eyes, but the words I spoke were calm, measured. It wasn't easier. It was abandonment. There was a long silence. And then she said, "I'm so sorry. I'd give anything to take it back." My pulse thudded in my throat as I replied, "I don't need anything from you except the truth and boundaries." The line went quiet, her apology hanging between us like tremors before an avalanche. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. What boundaries? I let my gaze drift to the snowy pines outside. Steady and unmoving. "I need space. I need you to respect my life here. No visits without notice. No calls after 8. No guilt trips." Each boundary felt like a brick in a wall I was building to protect the person I'd become. She agreed, tears leaking into her words. Promising to earn trust I'd nearly forgotten I once had. Hanging up, I felt both relief and grief clench at my ribs. Relief that I'd stood firm. Grief for the daughter I used to be who'd needed her so badly. By midday, Dad was waiting with a stack of fresh snowboards in the garage. Sunlight glinting off the boards' glossy tops. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and said, "You did good." I leaned into him, tasting spring in his cologne. Knowing he'd fought for me in court, not for custody alone, but for the right to decide my own fate. A gentle pride bloomed in my chest as we clicked into our bindings. This was more than a new life. It was a life I'd chosen, with people who chose me back. As we pushed off, the wind tore past, and I laughed loud and free, knowing every turn was mine to own. That evening, we gathered in the living room by the fire. Hannah reading out pages from Talia's latest painting project, Lily dozing on Dad's lap, Mason narrating a pretend commentary of our day's runs. I realized how full my life had become. Every empty space from Richmond replaced with laughter, warmth, and the promise of tomorrow. I caught Dad's eye across the room, his smile soft as falling snow. And I knew he saw the same thing, a family forged in trials, bound by choice rather than blood alone. I raised my mug of cocoa in a silent toast to belonging earned and home reclaimed. Weeks later, as spring coaxed green from the earth and melted the snowbanks into rivulets, I stood at the front of the auditorium for the school play My First. The lights warmed my face as I took a steadying breath and delivered my first line, clear as a bell. In the audience, I spotted Lily cheering and Dad wiping a proud tear. While Mom sat at the back row, hands folded, eyes steady, I glanced at her, nodded once, and carried on. In that moment, I knew forgiveness wasn't a gift you hand over. It's a script you rewrite with every choice you make. And this was my final scene. Story 2. Ian is my name. I finished from law school last month, and I'm 26 years old. At the top of my class with distinction, the ceremony took place in the university auditorium, which was crowded with relatives. People applauding, cameras flashing, flowers and tears, and all the other things you would anticipate from such a significant event. Ian Maxwell, second to last, summa cum laude, was my name. As the audience applauded, I stood, crossed the stage in a dapper blue suit and tie, shook hands with the dean, and held the rolled certificate. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a vacant row close to the front. I had booked my parents' row months in advance. 5 chairs were included. They were all 5 empty. I thanked my instructors, grinned through the applause, and posed for photos with both professors and classmates. But since I already knew they wouldn't show up, I felt numb on the inside. My mom casually mentioned, "Oh honey, your dad and I were thinking we might skip it." When I contacted her the week before to be sure, the same weekend. Your brother's startup has a major launch party. Do you recall? That seemed a little more pertinent to us. Vague. Contemptuous. And tinged with her typical tone, her words lingered in the air like smoke. For example, my accomplishments were respectable but unimpressive. Nathan is 2 years younger than me, so we can't be compared. In order to pursue innovation, he left college his sophomore year. This primarily involved working on a pitch deck for an app that I'm still not convinced accomplishes anything and hanging out with Instagram's wealthy youth. My parents have always had a strong, unwavering, and loud belief in him. Whenever I returned home from law school or college, your brother was featured on a podcast. And it was Nathan. Nathan just had a meeting with a San Francisco venture capitalist for a startup incubator. Nathan's team is taking a plane to Austin. Never mind. The reality that he has lost both investor rounds, has not turned a profit, and continues to live rent-free. My parents co-signed the loan while I was driving the Audi. I worked through law school in the interim. Studying case law while eating ramen in a one-bedroom apartment I could hardly afford. Bartending on the weekends. Teaching undergraduates during the final season. And pulling late hours. I had no time to protest. So I didn't. All I did was work. Before I even graduated, I received scholarships, made the dean's list each semester, and got an internship at one of the top companies in the state. When I told my family that I had been offered a clerkship with Judge Harrow, however, they hardly noticed. "Is that like being his assistant?" my mother said. My dad just emailed back a thumbs-up emoji after I passed the bar the first time I took it. That was it. I wasn't shocked when they failed to show up on graduation day. I wasn't shocked. But I was saddened. The fact that they didn't even text was what caught me off guard. Not a single phone call. No. Well done, Ian. No. You have our admiration. Not even a week. Sorry. We were unable to attend. As I watched students put their arms around their parents beneath the auditorium's golden lights, I had a strange mixture of resignation and contempt. After that, I went out by myself, got into my car, and made my way home quietly. I sent thank you notes to every one of my supporters a few days later. My teachers, my study group members, and even my landlord, who waived fines for my 3 late rent payments last year. My family didn't receive anything from me. I worked out what the goal was. Not out of malice. The bar results were then released. I kept my family members in the dark. Not Nathan. Not my aunt. Nor my parents. I didn't make any social media posts. The family group chat was still somehow always buzzing with updates on Nathan's vision or photos of his dog with CEO-esque remarks, so I didn't post anything there. Rather, I informed the firm's mentor, who grinned, gave me a pat on the back, and said, "Welcome aboard, counselor." This was the bit that surprised me the most. He contacted a buddy at the New York Herald who had written a brief item on the year's top-performing bar aspirants. There was my name, my GPA, and my picture. A saying regarding tenacity. Even my record of receiving scholarships and landing a federal clerkship right out of school were cited. It was sent to someone else in my family, but not to me. As I prepared to move downtown, I was packing up my books in my flat a week after the article was published, when I received a knock at the door. The business had offered to pay for my first 6 months. When I opened it, I saw my dad standing there with a folded newspaper in one hand while wearing khakis and a jacket. He was unsure of how to begin the conversation, as seen by the stiff expression on his face. We hadn't seen one another in person for months. He displayed the document. The article was from the Herald. Red ink was used to surround my photo. I remained silent. Leaning on the doorframe was all I did. "How come you didn't inform us?" "Oh," he said. He didn't sound furious. It was perplexed. He seemed to have forgotten each time they had made me feel insignificant. As if he truly didn't understand why I wouldn't tell him about the most significant event in my life. As if the previous 2 decades had never occurred. I just gave the paper a nod. "Go ahead," I said. "Take a look at the headline." He cast his gaze downward. After overcoming the odds, Ian Maxwell, a first-generation student and top bar scorer, joins a prominent business. He blinked. "It's not you." "First gen," I interrupted him. "Dad, you never arrived. Not for this. Not for anything." Perhaps I had to overcome more than just the odds. His mouth opened a little as if he were about to defend himself. "Perhaps." Then he just closed it once more. I observed as he came to the realization that this was more than simply missing a ceremony. All of this was about picking Nathan, minimizing all I accomplished, and making me bear the burden of the world while they lavished lavish attention on someone who was only ever carrying their ego. Before he could say another word, on the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed. To respond, I turned and went inside. He wasn't invited in. I also didn't shut the door. I simply left him standing. The business made the call. My eyes were still on the doorway as I calmly took it up. "Hello?" "Yes." "Apologies. Only taking care of something. The following Monday. I'll be there." Once again. "Thank you." He was still standing there when I turned around, but his shoulders were hunched. He appeared older than I had recalled. Smaller? When he opened his mouth once again, I knew he wasn't there to defend or dispute. He was looking for the me that bent in the past. When Dad received that disappointed face, the child would soften, no matter how late or unworthy. The son used to long for a pat on the back, but I no longer lived here as that version of myself. I waited for him to say anything that he believed would make things better. Some form of "we're proud," or "we didn't realize it meant that much" was practiced. Rather, it was revealed that your mother had not intended for Nathan's debut to be that way. She simply pondered. I held out a hand. Don't focus on what she intended. I gave you months' notice of the date. You were aware of the steps I had to take to get there. At first, I wasn't even interested in becoming a lawyer. I did everything because I believed that if I did everything correctly, I may finally matter to you. I stopped sleeping. A piece of mine and Summer's pals, attempting to get your admiration. Furthermore, you didn't even text. He twitched his face. You didn't seem to need us. You always appeared to be okay. It hurt more than I thought it would. Since it was accurate, I had always behaved perfectly. In a sense, I didn't shout. I didn't voice any complaints. I didn't snap. When I received socks for Nathan's birthday, and he received a $3 drone. When they stuffed my scholarship letter into a drawer and framed his podcast portrait in the corridor, I didn't object. As the self-sufficient son, I portrayed the strong one. I also taught them that my accomplishments didn't need to be celebrated. I was done with that position. Though, I said, I needed you. I simply stopped anticipating you. When a truth is revealed, there is a strange hush that descends. and neither party is sure what will happen next. I saw something shatter behind his eyes for the first time in a long time as he glanced down at the page once more before turning to face me. Not really sorrow. More akin to guilt. Like he had fallen into a mirror and not liked what he saw. Shock was layered on top. And then, "Your brother," he said. "The app has been difficult for him. A few investors withdrew. Lately, he has been spending more time in his room. Naturally, you considered him." We reasoned. I interrupted. "You have always done that. In front of you. I may be bleeding out. You would still inquire about Nathan's well-being." I didn't take anything back. But it came out harsher than I had intended. The back of his neck was massaged. "Now what can we do, Mommy?" When she viewed this piece, she started crying. "Claimed that we were unaware that you were relocating downtown." "You didn't care," I said. He nodded slightly. "You're correct." A pause occurred. I could sense that it was extending this awkward void left by years-old apologies. "Will we be invited to the bar ceremony?" he then inquired. I looked at him. Without immediately responding, because such was the situation. The exam was that. The roads forking. He was making an awkward attempt. But had decades of absence been erased by effort now? Was a single agonizing glance sufficient to get a place at my table? I took a step forward, folded my arms carefully, and gave him a direct look. "Do you recall when I won the citywide writing prize at the age of 12? Slowly. He nodded. "Yes. I brought the certificate home with me." "And you wrote about the Constitution? What were you saying?" His gaze fell. "That's cute," I remarked. "Nathan constructed a go-kart." "That's right." My chest constricted as I inhaled. I discovered that I'm only the side story. Even when I win. On that day, I've become your fallback option. And my tale is important now, that Nathan is abruptly disintegrating. He didn't answer. He was not required to. "I will update you on the bar ceremony." I retreated towards the door after saying that, "Don't anticipate a front row." Though, with the newspaper still in his hand, he turned to go. His shoulders drooped further than they had when he got there. But he stopped and turned around as he got to the corridor. "Ian, you have my sincere admiration. Both of us are. We just had no idea how to demonstrate it." I tied a little knot. It could have been recognition, but it wasn't forgiveness. He took a little step and vanished down the stairway. I leant against the door and closed it. Letting out a breath that seemed to have been held for years, I surveyed the flat. Seeing rolled-up carpets, half-empty boxes, and a solitary framed picture of my closest buddy and I at the Law Journal dinner. Although it seemed like mine, it wasn't like home. My phone then buzzed once more. Nathan was the one. Nathan came upon the article. "It's kind of you to keep it to yourself. One more bus. Mom and Dad are acting like you're a huge celebrity now." "Nathan, they're simply pretending, aren't they? Do you believe you could assist me in obtaining a loan?" "Nathan, apps are having issues. Most likely. You know a few people." The screen glowed dimly in the dingy afternoon light as I gazed at Nathan's letters. For him, every message was exactly right. Somewhat envious. Passive-aggressive. Yet nonetheless able to make a request. Even in the midst of his alleged tough time, he was unable to control himself. He managed to transform my moment into his chance. I didn't answer. Not quite yet. I placed the phone on the table next to partially unopened book-labeled package. In addition to what he stated, the speed at which everything had changed left my head reeling. After reading an item in a city daily, the family that had been ignoring me for years suddenly wanted to see me. Starting with my father, Nathan is now in my messages. What comes next? My mother is phoning while crying like a crocodile and feeling guilty. I approached the window to gaze out at the street. There was a queue of people waiting, talking in the summer heat. While a food truck was parked on the curb, everything inside of me felt uneasy. Even though everything was carrying on as usual, as if I were hovering between my former selves, the child who would have given Nathan a tense, yes, let me see what I can accomplish, and the guy I was at last growing into, who understood his value and no longer need their approval. Nevertheless, it was my younger brother Nathan. Even though I detested it, a part of me still wanted to keep him safe, for the sake of that recollection ingrained in my mind. Not for his sake. When we were 5 and 7 years old, we used to create Lego towns on the living room carpet before disillusionment and partiality set in. I took up the phone again. Read his messages once more. And then, almost like a reflex, the family group chat, which I had muted months prior, was checked. It was overflowing with photos from last weekend's launch party. Sleek lighting, furniture that was leased, and a catered setting that included mocktails and sliders. In the background is a huge poster with the app's logo. Every picture included my folks grinning like pleased sponsors, so proud of our boy for pursuing his dreams. Read one caption. Not a single word about me. It's funny because I don't recall seeing any photos of them during my graduation. Once more, my phone buzzed. Nathan, are you there? 2 seconds later. Though, tell me, Nathan, if you don't want to help, you don't have to ignore me. I gave an eye roll. Traditional. Another name appeared at the top of my screen before I could type anything. A call is coming in. Mum. Naturally. Before responding, I let it ring 3 times. I didn't greet them. I simply let her talk first. She put on the voice she often used when she knew she was wrong but didn't want to say it out. Oh, honey, she murmured. The article was recently shown to us. How come you didn't inform us? I spoke in a flat tone. It wasn't a huge issue. You said. An uneasy laugh followed a silence. I didn't intend it that way. You know, it's simply, your dad said we should part ways because your brother's event was already scheduled. But you failed to show up. That's what counts. One more pause. What you stated before really touched your father, she continued. Attempting to guide the discussion, he mentioned you were unhappy, but he didn't tell me everything. I answered that I was upset. Mum, you've missed every significant event in my life. Everyone. And you choose to celebrate a botched app launch instead of me having an entire row saved for you when I eventually made it. She said. That's not fair. But her voice was no longer sure. We were required by Nathan. I also needed you. I said. You simply failed to notice. Then there's silence on the line. Ian. You have our admiration. Indeed. We are. I've been chatting to your father. We would like to visit your bar. Ceremony for admission. Front row. Even flowers will be brought. I told them not to bother with flowers. This has nothing to do with it. One more pause. She couldn't answer this riddle with a gesture, but I could practically hear her trying to decide what would be sufficient. No more. Nathan reached out. 2. I heard. After a beat, she added, he's having trouble. He's under a lot of strain. You know, you are the only one who could be of assistance to him. It was there. The true cause of the call. I'll guess. Slowly. I said. He wants me to offer him a legal advantage, or speak with someone at the firm, or one of our clients. She gently said. He just needs a little guidance. A link. Something to maintain the momentum. Yes. I whispered. So I work. Once more. He receives the prize. It's unfair. She said it again. Growing up in your home wasn't either. I didn't hold out for a response. I hung up, put my phone down, and went to the bathroom to spritz my face with water. I glanced at myself in the mirror. I saw no resentful guy. I noticed a weary person, someone who possessed a silent hurt that had solidified into strength over time. And that power, it was no longer going to be given away. Nathan had sent me another message by the time I got back to my phone. You don't have to say yes. Nathan, don't pretend that you're superior to us now. Though, I lingered on the keyboard with my thumbs. I then began typing. Not to him. Though, not quite yet. Rather, I opened my calendar and added a ceremonial event. Confirmed assignment of seats. I wrote a brief email to the clerk's office after that. Subject. List of guests. Notice of update. Hello. For my bar ceremony. I would like to revise the seating arrangements. Only 3 visitor permits will be required. You may keep the first row open. After a moment of staring, I texted my phone a message. Buzzed once more. Nathan was still typing. But I had already decided what I wanted to do. So, I didn't open it. And then there was a knock on the door. A steady, purposeful knock. This time, the knock was more forceful. I had the same heaviness in my chest that I normally get when my family is around. I took a dish towel to clean my hands before carefully approaching Nathan. Almost expecting to find him standing there with that half-cocked smile he had on his face whenever he was in trouble. But hoping charm would make it go away. It wasn't Nathan. Though, it was my mother. Wearing shoes and a blue blouse. She looked a bit too put together for an unexpected visit. Holding a manila package to her breast, as if it were delicate. She had brushed her hair back, as she often did when she wanted to appear calm. Her lips formed a gentle, practicing grin. The same one she wore to church when she wanted everyone to believe that our family was ideal. I stopped by. I hope it's all right. She referred to me as though I were a long-lost relative. I had to see you. I let her in by slightly opening the door. She entered. The boxes are the focus of attention. The floor was piled high with books. The only framed picture on the wall. She said nothing about it. She just surveyed the area as if cataloging the type of life I had created in their absence. Without being asked, she took a seat on the couch's edge and put the envelope on her knees. I would like to speak with you, she said. Talk a lot. Not by hurried phone calls or messages. Since your dad returned home the other day, I've been thinking a lot. I'm still standing. Crossed arms. She inhaled deeply and talked without glancing at me. Everything changed with your birth. Our first was you. Both I and your father were afraid. I remember thinking as soon as I held you, even though I had no idea what I was doing, he will become something, not merely intelligent. You've always been powerful and resolute. I remained silent. Nostalgia didn't interest me. I desired the truth. She raised her head. She had watery eyes. I believed you would flourish if we pushed, challenged, and kept you grounded. You did, too. However, I no longer saw you as someone in need of affection at some point. Just someone who persevered. And it was the turning point when Nathan appeared. He was quite unusual. Sensitive. Delicate. We thought we had to keep him safer. Encourage him. I chuckled to myself. You handed the entire ladder to him. She winced. I see it now. I know. She moved the envelope a little in my direction and set it on the table between us. What is that? I inquired. We missed everything. Softly. She said. I discovered pictures of your honors in the rear of the file cabinet. Copies of your letters of scholarship. The Herald article. I highlighted the portions that people didn't even know after printing it out. Even a brief message from your third-grade teacher is included. Do you recall? Mrs. Hanley, I didn't grab the envelope. She added. In addition, I wrote you a letter rather than an email. An actual one. I reasoned that you could read it if you ever wanted to. However, I won't ask you to be quiet once again. I didn't come here to beg for your forgiveness or to offer Nathan assistance. I won't lie. Though, he's having problems. The app isn't working. He's afraid investors are pulling out. We fear for his life. Slowly. I nodded. And you believed that I may save him once more? No. She shook her head. No more. I'm here to inform you that we don't deserve your assistance because of this. And we will also deserve it if you choose to leave us. She straightened her clothes and got to her feet, appearing smaller than I had recalled. You've created something amazing, and we didn't witness it. But I'm hoping you'll allow us someday. She began to go towards the door but stopped, her hand resting on the handle. Your ceremony at the bar. We'll take a seat in the rear row if one is available. Otherwise, we'll wait outside to see you leave with that certificate. She didn't say anything more before leaving, and I remained there silently for a long time after the door snapped shut. I finally took a seat and gazed at the envelope. After hovering my fingertips over the flap, I tugged it open, as if she had spent hours selecting what to add. The contents were tidy and well organized. A copy of my letter from the State Scholarship Board was there, along with a picture of myself at the age of 14, smiling wearily while holding up a prize. A red piece of construction paper, folded. When I was 8 years old, I sent my mother a thank you message on Mother's Day. She had suppressed it. A 6-page handwritten message was also enclosed in the mail. I took a while to read it. I reached for my phone and at last read Nathan's final message. Forget. Nathan, you have nothing to give me. I returned the type. Me excellent. As I'm not making an offer, I didn't hold out for a response. I blocked the number. Not out of hatred, but because I needed space. He had always found a way to twist my success into a safety net. That was over now. A week later, the bar ceremony arrived. I wore the same navy suit from graduation. Except this time it felt different. Like armor. Not just clothing. The ceremony was formal. Brief. Filled with clapping and proud families. When my name was called Ian Maxwell admitted to the State Bar Association, I stood tall, walked across the stage, and shook hands with the presiding judge. The applause was loud, but I didn't search for it. As I stepped off stage and walked into the aisle, I spotted them. My parents not in the front row, not even the middle. They were standing at the very back. Behind the last set of chairs near the exit, my dad held a small bouquet. Sunflowers. My mom clutched the Herald, clipping in her hand. Folded and worn like she'd been carrying it every day since she found it. They didn't wave. They didn't call out. They just watched. When the ceremony ended, I walked out through the lobby, ignoring the people, shaking hands and taking photos. I stepped outside into the sharp summer air and let it fill my lungs. I stood alone for a few moments, watching as other families spilled out, laughing and hugging. Then I heard a voice behind me. "Counselor." It was Judge Harrow, the man I was set to clerk for. He extended his hand. "Impressive work today. Looking forward to having you on board." "Thank you, sir," I said, shaking his hand as he turned to leave. He added over his shoulder, "You've earned this. Every bit of it. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." I nodded, his words sinking in deeper than he probably intended, and then slowly I turned to see my parents standing at a respectful distance, unsure if they were allowed to approach. This time I gave a small nod. They walked over. My dad held out the bouquet. "We didn't know what kind you liked." I took them. "I'm not promising anything," I said. My mom nodded. "That's okay. We just wanted to be here." I looked down at the sunflowers. Bright, stubborn things. They grew toward the light. "No matter what, let's go get lunch," I said. "Just lunch. No speeches. No questions about Nathan." They nodded again. Quiet. Careful. We walked toward the car together. Not as a healed family. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, as something new. And this time, I led the way. My name is Noah. I'm 28. And if you had asked me 6 months ago where my life was headed, I probably would have laughed and said, hopefully somewhere warmer. I was working 2 jobs. One is a part-time graphic designer and another doing inventory at a supply warehouse, barely scraping by. Life wasn't terrible, just bland. Predictable. And then my Aunt Evelyn passed away and everything changed. And Evelyn was the kind of woman you only meet once in a lifetime. Sharp-witted, brutally honest, and somehow always 2 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. She never married, never had kids of her own, but she built a thriving interior design business from scratch. A woman with taste. She used to say I should never have to ask permission. Growing up, she was the only person in my family who treated me like I mattered. My parent passive. Always tiptoeing around my cousin Trevor, who could do no wrong. Trevor was the golden boy, the star athlete, the charming charlatan, the next big thing in the family. Even though he never actually did anything, every time he tanked a job or crashed a car, there was always someone to bail him out, usually with Aunt Evelyn's money. When Evelyn passed, the entire family descended like vultures. Everyone wanted something. Jewelry, paintings, furniture, the business, especially the business. And Trevor, he walked into the wake in a tailored suit, shaking hands like a politician and telling anyone who would listen that Evelyn had already promised him the company years ago. I kept my mouth shut. Not because I didn't care. Believe me, I did. But because I knew Evelyn, she didn't make promises lightly. And she didn't write people into her will unless she meant it. The reading of the will was uncomfortable for my aunt's lawyer. Mr. Jenkins was this thin, stooped man with watery eyes and a voice like dry paper. Everyone sat in tense silence as he read through the list of assets. Jewelry went to my mom. The summer home went to an old friend from Evelyn's college days. A couple of paintings were donated to a museum. And then, nothing. Nothing was said about the business. Not a word. Trevor, Smug grin spread across his face like spilled wine. He turned to me and gave this little nod like tough luck. Loser. My mom patted my shoulder, whispering something about how Evelyn must have forgotten and that it wasn't fair. But maybe Trevor would let me help out at the company. I just smiled, shrugged, said, "It's fine. I'm happy for him, and let them think I got nothing." What they didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that Evelyn had left me something separate. A private envelope delivered to my apartment 2 days after the wall reading. Inside was a handwritten letter and a second legal document signed and notarized, transferring full ownership of the business to me. Not a share, not a roll, everything. The letter said, "Noah, you have vision. Trevor has teeth. I know which one. Build something lasting. I want you to have what I built, but you'll have to be smart about it. Let the rats think the cheese is theirs." I stared at that sentence for a long time. Let the rats think the cheese is theirs. So, I played dumb. Let Trevor stroot around. Let the rest of the family buzz about how he was going to take the company global and honor Evelyn's legacy. He started redecorating her office even though he hadn't technically been inside the building since high school. He held meetings mostly with friends who had 0 qualifications and told everyone that he'd be officially taking over the business. On Monday, last week, we ran into each other in a parking lot near Evelyn's old office. He was leaning against a car he definitely couldn't afford, wearing sunglasses, even though it was cloudy. "You should start packing," he said casually. "This office is mine now. Got to clear out the dead weight." I kept my expression blank. "Sure," I said. "Just be there Monday." He laughed like I was some clueless intern. "Don't worry. I'll throw in a good word for you with HR." I didn't respond, just nodded and walked off. Inside, I was buzzing. Jenkins and I had already sorted out the transition with the board. The company's core staff, most of whom had been loyal to Evelyn for over a decade, had signed off on it. The rebranding had already begun. I had meetings lined up, a new website, launching a full vision for the next 6 months. But I said nothing because rats don't stop chewing just because the lights are off. They only run when they see the trap. Monday morning arrived like a storm front. I got to the office early, dressed in the nicest suit I owned, hair done, calm but electric. I sat behind Evelyn's old desk, the one she used to perch on during brainstorm sessions, and waited. Jenkins was already in the adjacent room. 2 security guards, quiet, firm, stood near the entrance in case things got messy. I wasn't expecting a scene, but Trevor had a way of turning molehills into volcanoes. At exactly 9 a.m., the front door slammed open. Trevor walked in like he was being filmed. Chin up, arms swinging and dragging behind him, a smug-looking guy in a blazer who had family lawyer written all over him. He barely looked at the receptionist. "Let's go," he barked, heading straight for the office. I heard the footsteps echo through the hallway, saw the shadow pause outside the frosted glass. Then the door opened. He walked in mid-sentence. "I'll have them start clearing out that tacky vase collection by today." And then stopped. His face lost all color. His mouth opened, then closed. His lawyer took a step forward, confused, until he looked past Trevor and saw me sitting comfortably behind the desk. Papers spread neatly before me. Evelyn's framed portrait hanging just above my shoulder. I folded my hands. "Morning," I said. "You're early." Trevor blinked like he'd just been hit with a splash of cold water. His eyes flicked from me to the desk, to the chair he thought would be his. And then to the file folders labeled with projects he probably couldn't pronounce. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, jaw tightening like he was chewing gravel. The lawyer at his side leaned in and muttered something under his breath, probably asking who I was, or why Trevor looked like he'd just swallowed his own tie. I didn't move. I let the silence hang. "Why are you Trevor?" finally managed, gesturing vaguely at the desk, like it had betrayed him. "You're not supposed to be here. I own the company," I said plainly. Calmly. "Have a seat." "Trevor." He laughed, but it came out shaky. "You're joking." "This is a joke that Will said nothing about the business. I was promised there was a separate document," I said, lifting a folder and sliding it across the desk with 2 fingers. "And Evelyn left this company to me. Not to the family. Not to a board. To me." Trevor's lawyer snatched the folder and began scanning it, eyes narrowing behind his thick glasses. Trevor stared at me, chest rising and falling faster, now his whole persona. The cool, composed air apparent, was cracking at the edges. "No," he said, voice rising a notch. "This is supposed to be mine. She told me. She promised. She didn't." I cut in, still quiet. "She told you what you needed to hear to keep you off her back. She never intended for you to run this place. You know that deep down, I'm her nephew. I tilted my hill. So am I." His lawyer cleared his throat. "This document appears to be legitimate. Fully notarized. Filed before her death. If what it says is true..." He looked at Trevor and softened his voice. "Your aunt left the company entirely to Mr. Richards." Trevor's face twisted like he'd bitten into something rotten. "This is theft." He spat. "You manipulated her. She wasn't thinking clearly. She was sharper than you ever were," I said, letting some heat creep into my voice. "And don't insult her by pretending she didn't know exactly what she was doing. She gave me this business because I respected it. Because I respected her. You never even asked her how the company ran. You just assumed one day you'd be in charge. I deserve this." "No," I said, standing now. "You expected it. That's not the same thing." His lawyer leaned in again, probably telling him not to say another word. But Trevor wasn't hearing it. His face was flushed, now, trembling with something that was part rage, part humiliation. He stormed forward like he was going to say something else. Maybe shout. Maybe throw a tantrum like he used to at family dinners when he didn't get his way. But stopped short when one of the security guards stepped into view behind him. That's when he realized this wasn't a bluff. He wasn't in control. He wasn't even relevant anymore. He turned back to me, his voice cracking, more stunned than angry now. You kept this a secret. You let me think." I nodded. "I wanted you to show everyone who you really are without an evil, and to protect you. You didn't disappoint for a long second." He just stood there, deflated. The fire in him fizzled out like a wet match. His lawyer gently tapped him on the shoulder, murmuring something again. And this time Trevor listened. They both turned to leave. But just before he stepped out the door, he paused. "Look back at me. Is this it?" he asked. "Are you just going to toss me aside?" I shrugged. "You did it to yourself." And then he was gone. I sat back down slowly, heart pounding. Now that the moment had passed, the office was quiet again. Save for the distant hum of the phones and the ticking of the vintage wall clock Evelyn had insisted on keeping. Even after everyone else begged her to go digital, I looked around, taking it all in: the photos, the sketchbooks, the carefully curated chaos of her legacy for the first time since she passed. I felt like she was still here. Not gone. Just watching. Let the rats think the cheese is theirs. I glanced at her portrait again and smiled. Thanks, Evelyn. But that wasn't the end. Because later that afternoon my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin. One I didn't expect. And it wasn't an apology. It was a warning. He wasn't done. And what he had planned next was personal. The message was short. Just 7 words. You think this is over. It's not. I stared at it for a full minute, rereading it like maybe, just maybe, it would change the 3rd or 4th time through. But it didn't. Trevor had always been petty, impulsive, jealous, but I'd never seen him as truly dangerous. Just pathetic. Annoying in that mosquito whining at your ear kind of way. But there was something different in this message. No emojis. No fake bravado. Just bitterness. Cold and stripped down like he wasn't trying to provoke me. He was promising something. I didn't reply. Instead, I locked my phone and stood by the window in my aunt's office. My office now. And watched as the clouds rolled in over the city skyline. The building sat on a corner lot. Glass panes from floor to ceiling on the upper level. Evelyn loved the view. Said she got her best ideas. Watching the traffic crawl and the people hustle. You learn a lot by looking down. She used to joke, especially when everyone thinks you're on their level. The staff was already adjusting to the transition. I'd had one-on-one meetings all week. Kept Evelyn's old assistant on full-time. Laura. Absolutely fesaver. And even brought in a small tech team to modernize the workflow. The designers respected me. Maybe because I wasn't trying to be Evelyn. I wasn't rebranding for clout. I was just trying to grow the legacy she built carefully. Deliberately. But now I had a problem. Trevor and I knew better than to underestimate him. He was spoiled. Sure. Entitled, definitely. But he wasn't stupid. Underneath, all the posturing. There was something slippery. He knew how to twist things just enough to make you look like the bad guy. Even when you were just cleaning up his mess. That night, I called Mr. Jenkins and told him about the message. He sighed heavily. He's lashing out. Jenkins said, losing that company was a blow to his ego. I doubt he'll go through the courts. He doesn't have a leg to stand on. But be careful. People like your cousin don't always play by the same rules. I asked him to document the message, just in case he agreed. By Friday, small things started happening. First, an anonymous complaint was filed to the Better Business Bureau, claiming our design firm was scamming clients. Nothing specific, just vague language and a throwaway email address. Then an interior design review blog posted a hit piece on Evelyn's firm, citing fabricated stories about overbilling and unethical sourcing. It was clear someone was trying to tarnish the name. I had a strong suspicion who I kept my cool. I replied with a professional statement. Submitted a correction to the blog, which was clearly run by someone with no real audience, and reassured our top clients through a private newsletter. But it wasn't about the damage, it was about the intent. Trevor wasn't trying to ruin the company. He was trying to ruin me. On Monday morning, Laura came into my office holding a manila envelope. No return address. This came in the mailroom. It's weird, she said, dropping it on my desk like it smelled funny. Inside was a thick stack of printed out emails. Screenshots. Social media DMs. Some were mine, out of context fragments from conversations I'd had years ago when I worked freelance. Others were just made-up fabricated threads that made it look like I had stolen ideas from past clients. Mocked their taste. Even joked about overcharging. And on top, a sticky note. This is just the beginning. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. This wasn't petty anymore. It was tactical, calculated. Trevor had either hired someone or spent the last week digging through old digital garbage just to smear me. I wasn't sure which was worse. Either way, he was trying to get me to snap, to go public, to create drama that he could point to and say, "See? I told you he wasn't fit to run this place." But I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I reached out to an old friend of Evelyn's, Sandra Cho, a crisis management consultant. I'd met her a couple of times when I was younger, always dressed in sharp blazers and even sharper words. She'd helped Evelyn clean up a few messes in the past, usually involving greedy vendors or former employees with big mouths. Sandra answered on the second ring. "I've been waiting for your call," she said. "Trevor's name has been popping up on forums. Nasty stuff." I froze. Wait. What kind of forms the kind people use when they want to spread poison without fingerprints? She agreed to take the case, said she tracked the source of the envelope in the blog post, and do a sweep of the company's online presence. "We'll clean it up. But Noah," she added, "he's playing dirty. You may need to get ahead of him in a way he won't expect." That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Evelyn, about how she always warned me that family could be the most dangerous kind of enemy because they know where it hurts. She'd seen this coming. I realized that's why she kept everything so quiet. That's why she warned me to be careful with the transfer. Because she knew Trevor would burn the house down just to say he owned the ashes. But if he wanted to fire, I was ready. I showed up to the office Tuesday morning with a new plan. A quiet one. No announcements. No social media jabs. Just a shift. I began making changes to the company's legal structure, converting it to a trust-controlled entity under my sole direction. Sandra helped me lock down everything from client data to brand assets to internal communications. And then I started looking into Trevor. Not out of revenge. Not yet. But something told me he wasn't just bitter. He was hiding something. And when I found it, it would be my turn to show up at his door. I spent the next 2 weeks digging. Sandra had access to databases I didn't even know existed. Legal archives, company registries, private investigator networks. Between her and a couple of freelance cybersecurity consultants she'd worked with before, it didn't take long before the cracks in Trevor's facade started to show. It started with a trail of suspicious invoices. Apparently, Trevor had attempted to start his own interior design consultancy about 2 years before Evelyn passed. It failed badly. He funneled tens of thousands of dollars into marketing, flashy office decor, and paying friends to act as clients to leave glowing reviews online. But he didn't actually know how to design anything. Every portfolio piece on his website was either lifted from Pinterest or modified versions of Evelyn's firm's past work. Eventually, a client caught on. Then another. He got hit with a small claim suit. The company folded within 6 months. He never told the family. Instead, he repackaged himself as a strategic consultant. Read. unemployed with a LinkedIn account, and waited for Evelyn to die, so he could slide in and wear the crown he thought was already his. But it got worse. Sandra traced payments from one of Trevor's accounts to a shady PR fixer in another state, and the same one responsible for the smear block and likely the forged emails in that envelope. Trevor had paid them to generate negative buzz around me with the plan to swoop in later and rescue the company as the responsible alternative. That was the final straw. I wasn't just going to clean this up anymore. I was going to end it. But I wasn't going to do it loud. I remembered Evelyn's motto class is quiet. And I decided that the best revenge wasn't just cutting Trevor out. It was making sure everyone saw why he didn't belong in the room to begin with. A week later, I held a private stakeholders brunch. Not flashy, just an intimate rooftop event with our top clients. Legacy staff. A few press contacts. And Evelyn's oldest friends in the industry. I called it the Vision Forward, gathering a soft reintroduction of the company under my leadership. No streamers. No hype. Just good food. Fresh ideas and one very important presentation. I waited until the end of the morning to show it. Before we go, I said, stepping up to the small platform near the ivy-covered wall, I want to honor Evelyn's legacy by being transparent with all of you who trusted her for years. You deserve to know how this company has transitioned and why it's in good hands now. I clicked the remote. The projector lit up the white brick behind me. Slide after slide detailed the changes we had implemented: staff promotions, ethical sourcing partnerships, community design workshops, even new sustainability initiatives Evelyn had sketched out but never had time to launch. Applause came gently, respectfully. Then came the last slide. And this one was for Trevor. It was titled, "What We Stand Against." The screen filled with screenshots, heavily redacted. Anonymized, but damning. The smear block. The forged emails. The payments traced to the shadow PR firm. And then finally, the fraudulent design company Trevor had run under a pseudonym, which had been sued twice and blacklisted by multiple design platforms. There was a hush. I looked around the crowd. Some gasped, some nodded knowingly. A few exchanged sharp glances, but none of them were surprised. That was the most telling part. And then I said, "You'll probably hear some noise in the coming weeks. Rumors. Accusations. I've chosen not to respond to most of them. Not because I'm afraid of what's being said, but because they don't deserve the dignity of a public argument. We are here to build. And what we're building next won't include the people who tried to tear it down." There was no applause. Not yet. Just a long, respectful silence. And then Evelyn's friend, Sandra, who had been seated quietly near the back, stood and raised her glass to Noah. She said, "For doing it right." The applause that followed was real and loud. That night, I returned to the office after hours. Just me. The soft hum of the AC and the quiet creak of Evelyn's old chair as I sat back and looked at the city lights. It felt surreal. A year ago, I was scraping together money for rent. Now I was running a legacy company and fending off my own cousin's attempts at sabotage. I thought about letting it in there. I'd won. The company was safe. Trevor was publicly humiliated without ever being named. He was finished. Right, but that wasn't enough. Because Trevor wasn't just wrong. He was dangerous. And I needed to make sure he never got close to anyone I cared about again. So I made one more call to Jenkins. "I want to take legal action." I told him. Defamation. Harassment. False claims. Use everything we've gathered. He hesitated for a moment. Are you sure he's already lost everything? He's not going to stop. I said. Not until someone forces him to, so we filed. The case was airtight with Sanders' documentation, email traces, and the fraudulent payments. It wasn't even close. Within weeks, Trevor was served. He tried to deny everything, blamed his lawyer, claimed he was misled, said it was a misunderstanding. The judge didn't buy it. He was ordered to pay damages, issue a formal retraction through the block, and barred from contacting anyone at the company directly or indirectly. And just like that, the man who once strutted around like he owned the world was left with nothing but a second-hand Audi and a shattered reputation. The cherry on top. The building Evelyn left me. Our headquarters had a small and used office on the first floor, which Trevor had once claimed as his future workspace. After the lawsuit ended, I turned it into a free mentorship lounge for young designers from underprivileged backgrounds. I named it the Evelyn Room. Every week, students came in with notebooks and wide eyes, flipping through fabric swatches and layout blueprints like they were handling treasure. And every time someone asked me why we did it, I just smiled and said, because not everyone gets a fair start. But everyone deserves a real chance. Trevor never showed up again, though. Once, about a month later, Laura told me he stopped by the building. He just stood outside the front doors, staring up at the sign Evelyn Richards Design Group, before walking away without a word. I didn't feel sorry for him. He had everything handed to him again and again. He burned it all, trying to prove he was better than everyone else, and I just did the work, stayed quiet, waited, let the storm pass. Because Evelyn was right. Class is quiet, but revenge, that's just good business.